And how are you folks this fine day? Reiterating where we have going and reviewing where we have been, we've talked about the first force, which was the psychoanalytical force, and now we are on the second force, which is behaviorism. But the term behaviorism has been changed to the learning theory. But nonetheless, we are going to go ahead and look at behaviorism as it started out, and then you can switch the name whenever you want to. We've gone and visited with and about Ivan Pavlov, who picked up on the conditioning of the dog to salivate upon the cue of the meat powder, and then a sound was made by a bell or a buzzer. We're not quite sure what took place. It kind of varies in there. But anyway, a tone was heard, and then the meat powder was not presented, but just the tone was heard, and the same reaction took place with the salivating dog. Uh, it's a conditioning. It was called classical conditioning. The reason it's called classical conditioning, I believe, is because it was the first noted conditioning of this type. And so that leads us to what could have probably have been one of the greatest psychologists in the history of theories, with the exception that he had a little misdirection in his life, and we'll be talking about that quite soon. But this individual is John B. Watson, born in 1878, passed away in 1958. One of the notable things about John B. Watson that we hear a lot about and associate a great deal with John B. Watson is his ability, or what he perceived his ability to be, is to present stimulus in a way that behavior could change, that conditioning could change. And we're going to look at some of the statements that he made and some of the concerns that he made. The reason that we don't hear a lot maybe about him and why he isn't recorded in various texts and so forth, and we'll get to that too. But he did not end up as a psychologist, even though he did hold a very high position in the psychological world, and then at a later time was recognized for this. So we have John B. Watson that we're going to be looking at now. He established the psychological school of behaviorism, researching animal behavior, child rearing, and advertising. And this is what I want to focus on, at least to a small extent. The fact that advertising, I would say, is largely based on behaviorism. Now, there's other theories that we can bring in to advertising, but usually they pair two objects together, and by the pairing of these two objects together, we feel as though that we will achieve some miraculous change in our lives. Now, here's what is important about advertising. Advertising tells us that our teeth are too gray. Tells us that our hair, if you have hair, doesn't have the liveliness and the spring to it that it should have, and be able to swirl your head, and the hair goes every direction and then bounces back in place. We drive the wrong automobile, so advertising tells us what automobile we should be driving. And we stink. Advertising tells us that we stink. In other words, advertising develops some type of deficiency within the individual, but lucky for us, they have the solution and they know how to fix it. And if you just use this certain product, your wrinkles will disappear, your hair will bounce, you'll be happily driving an automobile, we won't have a unwanted odor about us before. And besides all of this, we have lost 100 pounds in just 30 days. And so all of this is associated with advertising. But what is interesting is the pairing that takes place. And this I emphasize in behaviorism. The pairing. They compare two objects. In other words, they take an individual with whiter teeth and they have a beautiful smile there and a beautiful person. And if we use this whitening product, then our teeth will become white and we'll have this beautiful smile. We'll have this beautiful glow about us. And so this is the pairing that takes place. If you watch advertising, you will see this. Okay, back to Watson and his experiment with little Albert. Basically, I believe Albert was, 6 to 9 months of age, small, infant. And Albert would then be allowed to see a white object, a white rat. Well, while he was watching with this, or a white coat, and while he was watching this white object, someone would come up behind the child and have an iron bar and a hammer and hit it. And of course, the sound would frighten the child. And after this took place for a while, when they would pair this sound with something in white, then after a while, they would take the sound away and just show a white object, and little Albert would become frightened. So this was what Watson is somewhat noted for this experiment. It's kind of a favorite experiment that individuals like to talk about, but a very, very important experiment. Now, this is what happened to the little child, and he died at the age of 6. So little Albert moved away before Watson had a chance to uncondition him. So what Watson was going to do was going to condition him to be afraid of something in white and then going to uncondition him. Well, little Albert moved away before Watson had an opportunity to condition him to no longer fear something in white. Now, going on here, it was also a medical condition with little Albert. So this may have somewhat skewed the results. One of the statements that Watson had here, he says, "I know that I can never amount to anything in the educational world unless I have better preparation at a real university." Now, he was attending some schools there, so he decided to go on and get a better preparation for schools. In 1920, he had been working at Johns Hopkins University, which is very prestigious. But Watson's downfall was his affair with his graduate assistant, Rosalie Rayner. Watson was a very somewhat attractive individual. He did like the fairer sex, and due to his involvement with Rosalie, he was asked to leave. Now, what is kind of interesting is that Watson and his wife were invited over to Rosalie's house for a dinner party, which they did. Watson's wife feigned an illness. She wasn't feeling well, and she had to go lay down a little while in a bed. And while she was in the room unattended, she went through Rosalie's personal items and found letters written to Rosalie from Watson. Well, Watson uh, agreed to a divorce and they were separated. So Watson then was removed from his position at Johns Hopkins. He went on to work in advertising, and after advertising, then he really raised to a prominent position. Now, here's what Watson had stated, and I hope that I can get this on so you can read it. Give me a dozen healthy infants, well formed, and my own specified world to bring them up in, and I'll guarantee to take anyone at random and train him, or could possibly be her today, to become any type of specialist I might select. Doctor, lawyer, artist, merchant, chief, and yes, even beggar man and thief. Regardless of his talents, penchants, tendencies, abilities, vocations, and the race of his ancestors, I am going beyond my facts, and I admit it, but so have the advocates of the contrary, and they have been doing it for many thousand years. So Watson claimed that through conditioning, he could go ahead and make these individuals any one that he wanted them to be, or could go into any vocation that he wanted them to go into. This is a powerful concept. I'm going to admit that. And not necessarily that I have to admit it, but I want to emphasize that it is a powerful concept. And so I think it's well to examine behaviorism. Watson may have been the father of behaviorism. We'll be talking about Skinner, who really played a dominant role in the behavioristic movement. And as we bring this forward, I want you to now see more and more distinguishing characteristics between Force 1 and Force 2. And we'll be talking about this a little bit more when we visit with B.F. Skinner. So until B.F. Skinner, have a good day.